हेलो दोस्तों, बिगनर्स माइंड में आपका स्वागत है। और अभी हम कर रहे हैं इकोनॉमिक्स। ठीक है, तो फिर प्लेलिस्ट बना रखिए 9th से लेकर के 12th तक की कंप्लीट एनसीईआरटी की। आप जा करके देख सकते हैं। यहाँ तक पढ़ लिया था। एल्जेब्रिक मेथड, एक्स एंटी एग्रीगेट डिमांड इक्वल्स टू आई डैश प्लस सी डैश प्लस सी वाई। X ante aggregate supply equals to Y equilibrium requires that the plans of suppliers are matched by plans of those who provide final demands in the economy. Thus, in this situation, X ante aggregate demand equals to X ante aggregate supply. ठीक है, इक्विलिब्रियम ऑफ एक्स एंटी एग्रीगेट डिमांड एंड सप्लाई ये हो गया एक्स एंटी एग्रीगेट डिमांड एंड सप्लाई का कर्व लाइन। C dash plus I dash plus CY equals to Y bracket 1 minus C equals to C dash plus I dash, Y equals to C dash plus I dash equal divided by 1 minus C. Effect of an autonomous change in aggregate demand on income and output. We have seen that the equilibrium level of income demands on aggregate demand. Thus, if aggregate demand change, the equilibrium level of income change. This can happen in any one or combination of the following situations. Change in consumption. This can happen due to change in C dash, change in C. Change in investment. We have assumed that investment is autonomous. However, it just means that it does not depend on income. There are a number of variables other than income which can affect investment. One important factor is availability of credit. Easy availability of credit encourages investment. Another factor is interest rate. Interest rate is the cost of investable fund, and at higher interest rates, firms tend to lower investment. Let us now concentrate on change in investment with the help of following example. Let C equals to 40 plus zero point 0.8 y, I equals to 10. In this case, the equilibrium income obtained by equation y to AD comes out to 250. Now, let investment rise to 20. It can be seen that the new equilibrium will be 300. This can be seen by looking at a graph. This increase in income is due to rise in investment, which is a component of autonomous expenditure here. Where autonomous investment increases, the AD1 line shifts in parallel upwards and assumes the position AD2, the value of aggregate demand. Output y1 is y1f, which is greater than the value of output 0 y1 equals to y1 E1 by n. Amount E1f. E1f measures the amount of excess demand that emerges in the economy as a result of the increase in autonomous expenditure. Thus, E1 no longer represents the equilibrium. To find the new equilibrium in the final goods market, we must look for the point where the new aggregate demand line AD2 intersects the 45-degree line that occurs at point E2, which is therefore the new equilibrium point. The new equilibrium values of output and aggregate demand are Y2 and AD2 respectively. Note that in the new equilibrium, output and aggregate demand have increased by an amount Eg1 equals to Eg2 E2G, which is greater than the initial increment in autonomous expenditure delta I equals to I dash. Delta I dash equals to E1F equals to E2J. Thus, an initial increment in the autonomous expenditure seems to have a multiplier on the equilibrium values of aggregate demand and output. What causes aggregate demand and output to increase by an amount larger than the size of the initial increment in autonomous expenditure? We discuss it in section 4.3.3, the multiplier mechanism. It was seen in the previous section that with that with a change in the autonomous expenditure of 10 units, the change in equilibrium income is equal to 50 units from 250 to 300. We can understand this by looking at the multiplier mechanism, which is explained below. The production of final goods employs factors such as labor, capital, land, and entrepreneurship. In the absence of indirect taxes or subsidies, The total value of the final goods output is distributed among different factors of production: wages to labor, interest to capital, rent to land, etc. Whatever is left over is appropriated by the entrepreneur and is called profit. Thus, the sum total of aggregate factor payments in the economy, national income, is equal to the aggregate value of the output of final goods, GDP. In the above example, the value of extra output, 10, is distributed among various factors as factor payments, and hence the income of the economy goes up by 10. When income increased by 10, consumption expenditure goes up by 0.8. 10, since people spend 0.8 equals to MPC fraction of their additional income on consumption. Hence, in the next round, aggregate demand in the economy goes up by 0.810, and there again emerge an excess demand equal to 0.810. Therefore, in the next production cycle, producers increase their planned output further by 0.810 to restore equilibrium. When this extra output is distributed among factors, the income of the economy goes up by 0.810, and consumption demand increases further by 0.8 square 10, once again creating excess demand of the same amount. This process goes on round after round, with producers increasing their output to clear the excess demand in each round, and consumers spending a part of their additional income from this chapter, this extra production on consumption items, thereby creating further excess demand in the next round. Let us register the change in the value of aggregate demand on and output at each round in table 4.1. The last column measures the increments in the value of the output of final goods, and hence the income of the economy in each round. The second and third columns measure the increments in total consumption expenditure in the economy and increments in the value of aggregate demand in a similar way. In order to find out the total increase in output of the final goods, we must add up the infinite geometric series in the last column, that is 10 plus 0.8, 10 plus 0.8 square 10 plus infinite. ठीक है, आंसर क्या आ जाएगा 50. The multiplier mechanism in the final goods market: consumption round 1 0, aggregate demand 10, autonomous increment, output input 10. इसी तरीके से ये सारे राउंड भी हो जाएंगे. The increment in equilibrium value of total output thus exceeds the initial increment in autonomous expenditure. The ratio of the total increment in equilibrium value of final goods output to the initial increment in autonomous expenditure is called the investment multiplier of the economy, recalling that 10 and zero point 0.8 represent the value of delta I equals to delta A dash and MPC respectively. The expression for the multiplier can be explained as the investment multiplier delta y divided by delta a dash equals to 1 divided by 1 minus c equals to 1 divided by s, where delta y is total increment in final goods output and c equals to mpc. Observe that the size of multiplier depends on the value of c. As c becomes larger, the multiplier increases. Paradox of thrift: if all the people of the economy increase the proportion of income they save, that is, if the MPS of the economy increases, the total value of savings in the economy will not increase. It will either decline or remain unchanged. This result is known as the paradox of thrift, which states that as people become more thrifty, they end up saving less or same as before. This result, though sounds apparently impossible, is actually a simple application of the model we have learned. Let us continue with the example. Suppose at the initial equilibrium of y equals to 250, there is an exogenous and autonomous shift in people's expenditure pattern. They suddenly become more thrifty. This may happen due to a new information regarding an imminent war or some other impending disaster, which makes people more circumspect and conservative about their expenditures. Hence, the MPS of the economy increases, or alternatively, the MPC decreases from 0.8 to zero point 0.5 at the initial income level of AD1 star equals to Y1 star equals to 250. This sudden decline in MPC will imply a decrease in aggregate consumption spending and hence in aggregate demand. AD equals to A dash plus CY by an amount equal to zero point 0.8 minus 0.5 250 equals to 75. This can be regarded as an autonomous reduction in consumption expenditure to extent that the change in MPC is occurring from some exogenous cause and is not consequence of change in the variables of the model. But has aggregate demand decreased by 75, it falls short of the output Y1 star equals to 250 and there emerges an excess supply equal to 75 in the economy. Stocks are piling up in warehouses and producers decide to cut the value of production by 75 in the next round to restore equilibrium in the market, but that would mean a reduction in factor payments in the next round and hence a reduction in economic income by 75. As income decreases, people reduce consumption proportionally, but this time according to the new value of MPC, which is 0.5, consumption, expenditure, and hence aggregate demand decrease by 0.575, which creates again an excess supply in the market in the next round. Therefore, producers reduce output further by 0.575, income of the people decrease accordingly, and consumption, expenditure, and aggregate demand goes down again by 0.5 square 75. The process goes on, however, as can be inferred from the dwindling values of the successive round effects. The process is convergent. What is the total decrease in the value of output and aggregate demand? Add up the infinite series 75 plus 0.575 plus zero point 0.5 square 75 plus infinite, and the total reduction in output turns out to be 75 divided by 1 minus zero point 0.5 equals to 150. But that means the new equilibrium output of the economy is only Y2 star equals to 100. People are knowing now saving S2 star Y2 star minus C2 star equals to Y2 star minus C dash plus C2 dot Y2 equals to 100 minus 40 plus zero point 0.5 100 equals to 10 in aggregate. Whereas under the previous equilibrium they were savings S1 star equals to Y1 star minus C1 star equals to Y1 star C dash plus C1 dot Y1 star equals to 250 minus 40 plus zero point 0.8 250 equals to 10 at the previous MPC. C1 equals to zero point 0.8. Total value of savings in the economy has therefore remained unchanged. When A dash change, the line shifts upwards or downwards in parallel, where when C changes, however, the line swings up or down, an increase in MPS or a decline in MPC reduces the slope of the AD line and it swings downwards. We depict the situation in figure 4.8 at the initial values of the parameters A dash equals to 50 and C equals to zero point 0.8, the equilibrium value of the output and aggregate demand from equation Y1 star equals to 50 divided by 1 minus zero point 0.8 equals to 250. Under the changed value of the parameter C equals to zero point 0.5, the new equilibrium value of output and aggregate demand is Y2 star equals to 50 divided by 1 minus zero point 0.5 equals to 100. The equilibrium output and aggregate demand have declined by phenom 150 as explained above. This in turn implies that there is no exchange in the total value of savings. Some more concepts. The equilibrium output in the economy also determines the level of employment given the quantities of other factors of production. Think of a production function at aggregate level. This means that the level of output determined by the equality of Y with AD does not necessarily mean the level of output at which everyone is employed. Full employment level of income is that level of income where all the factors of production are fully employed in the production process. Recall that equilibrium attained at the point of equality of Y and AD by itself does not signify full employment of resources. Equilibrium only means that it if left to itself, the level of income in the economy will not change even when there is unemployment in the economy. The equilibrium level of output may be more or less than the full employment level of output. If it is less than the full employment of output, it is due to the fact that demand is not enough to employ all factors of production. This situation is called the situation of deficient demand. It leads to decline in prices in the long run. On the other hand, if the equilibrium level of output is more than the full employment level, it is due to the fact that the demand is more than the level of output produced at full employment level. This situation is called the situation of excess demand. It leads to rise in prices in the long run. अब आ जाते हैं समरी. When at a particular price level, aggregate demand for final goods equal aggregate supply of final goods, the final goods or product market reaches its equilibrium. Aggregate demand for final goods consists of ex ante consumption, ex ante investment, government spending, etc. The rate of increase in ex ante consumption due to a unit increment in income is called marginal propensity to consume. For simplicity, we assume a constant final goods price and constant rate of interest over short run to determine the level of aggregate demand for final goods in the economy. We also assume that the aggregate supply is perfectly elastic at this price. Under such circumstances, aggregate output is determined slowly by the level of aggregate demand. This is known as effective demand principle. An decrease in autonomous spending causes aggregate output of final goods to decrease by a larger amount through the multiplier process. और इसी के साथ ये वाला चैप्टर हो जाता है समाप्त. हम मिलेंगे अगले चैप्टर में.